Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode 13 of This Valorant Life. In this episode, Adam and I are going to do a deep dive into Ascent. We're going to go over the attacking side and then the defending side. And being, I think, Valorant's oldest map, it should be fully understood. But when I asked Adam which map was the one his clients typically play worse, he said this one. Is that your experience, Adam?
Yeah, even though the meta is kind of solved in the higher ranks, people suck at playing it. So I'm excited to get into this one, hopefully.
Okay, you mean the correct way is not just like rush B and then rush A and then rush B and then rush A?
I wish that'd be so simple.
Well, then I've got a lot to learn. So we're gonna jump into Valorant now. So Adam, we're gonna start on the attacking side and what the defaults are. But maybe even before we talk about what the defaults are, maybe you want to talk about what a default is.
Yeah, sure. So if you could think about the map as like three parts, right? You have B main, you have mid, and then you have A main, right? And when you default, you're kind of looking to take one or two of these areas of the map. So maybe you default for B main and mid, or maybe you default for A main and mid, right? That's a general idea. And you just want to like slowly work map control without dying. That's the point of a default. And as an attacker, right, like barriers are pushed back a little bit. So if you don't actually default to take map space, you actually have nothing, right? In this example here, if I just throw the jets around, if you don't actually take B main control, it technically belongs to defenders. If you don't actually take mid control, it technically belongs to defenders again. And then same for A main, right? Because they, just for this example, will put omens for the defenders. So if omen just takes the space, right, like if they're just watching it, attackers have nothing. In order to actually get some map control, you have to, actually enter past these red lines and then take that space and then push these guys back. That's the general idea.
So you would say, if I were to put it in slightly differently, it would be that the mini game around the default is how do we, one, take space, but two, ultimately try to understand where the defense is so we can make an intelligent decision to not to hit the site that is the strong side. Ideally, we're hitting the site that is the weak side, like two or less players, because then we just have a significant advantage.
Yep. That's well said. You're looking for the weak side. You can try to identify where the AWPS are. You can try to default in order to break Sentinel utility. That's also a very common one. You could default to bait out util if you're playing, maps where they have like a lot of nades and mollies. So stuff like that is very important. Probably in rank, the most common one is just defaulting to either get ult orbs on attack and or to break Sentinel util.
Or even figure out where the Sentinel is playing.
Yeah, true.
Right? Like ciphers on this side, we're gonna hit the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Or like a really common one I think on Ascent would be a Killjoys on B.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's not go into the microwave setup.
Right.
Let's just hit A. The default is to gather information and assess where players are playing. I guess at the higher ranks, it's fairly common. You would say, let's just default. Everyone knows what they're doing. And I think Hu just talked about this before. What do you tell players that you're coaching with? Are defaults an ideal way for like a lower rank player to tell their team to play? Or is it kind of hopeless?
So that's a good question. I kind of am on the side of the fence where it's like if you don't know what you're doing, defaults are kind of pointless just because the round plays out for too long. But at the same time, rushing is kind of pointless if people don't know how to rush. So if I were to pick between the two, probably opt for a default just because you don't want the round to end so fast.
What would be the simple language around a default? I think if I were to throw it out there, and I'd love for you to correct me, it's something around, let's take this space, but don't push into sight. Like that would be the level of a default.
Yeah, you could say, let's take A main, but like let's not commit. Like we don't have to actually commit. If you want to work mid, you just say, let's work mid. I think work/fight is a lot, like those terms are very important when you want to distinguish a default compared to say rush or go fast or something along those lines. It's less committal language, and I think that's really important.
So then now we've established what a default is. What does a standard default look like for Ascent?
Okay, so we have a few, but let's start with the most basic one. The most simple defaults that you can run is a 4-1. So what that means in terms of this map is you have 4 on this side and then 1 on this side. And typically your Sentinel will be the alone player. And the reason for that is because they have util that can kind of hold space. So if for this example, we have the turret that kind of just lets the Killjoy play safe. This turret is important to have because it blocks off the B main push and it also blocks off the mid push. So if this guy starts pushing cat, this guy starts pushing out mid. So that means that your team is actually pretty safe to work A main. So in this example, and in the majority of the examples that you'll do in ranked, it's good to just keep it simple and do a 4-1. And that means that you just have 4 players working A main. So it doesn't really matter what util you use to actually take the space. The most common one, if you're going fast, is Omen Blind. But on a default, you're more likely to do something like a KO knife or a Silver Dart. And The
Because you
goal
want to save that omen blind for sight.
for the exec, right? And the recon or the KO knife are both rechargeable. And that's another good point. Is initiator util, since it is rechargeable, it's super useful to use on a default because you're playing the round a little bit slower anyways.
So use the Silver Recon to take a main and then wait for it to recharge and then decide whether you want to use it to hit A.
Right. So
But I guess the one thing I want to point out here is that the power of KJ, especially on this map, and I guess this is why she's so meta over, like, let's say a Cypher, is the fact that you can put that turret there. It holds so much space. And it also means that if you don't want to hit A, you have all this space to fall back to.
right.
And number two, I think the elegance of you kind of explaining this default is that if you want your team to play this default, it's pretty easy if you have a KJ. You're just like turret B and just hold mid. Whereas like a 1-3-1 default or a 2-1-2 default, there's a lot more explaining to do if your team doesn't know how it works.
I guess in a different way to say it is if you're working 2 or 3 parts of the map at the same time, you're spread too thin, right? So for the sake of this conversation, maybe we can actually explore that a little bit. Say we have the Jet and the Sova working mid, right? So you'll probably get a dart here. Your Omen will smoke cat. This is where we get really complex, right? So this is the mid part. In order to take mid, you need the smoke cat, you need the dart mid, right? So that means Jet and Sova solo working or duo working mid. Then you have another pair here where they're working A main. So the most common example here is after the Omen does the smoke, he'll TP across here just to get a different sight line. And then the KO will use the KO knife here. So now we've established presence in mid and in A main, and this is a pretty strong start to the round. But what can happen is if you're working it too much, your Killjoy also gets active and then puts aggro turret here to break the enemy Killjoy turret here, and now you're working 3 parts of the map. And this can work. Honestly, it'll work decent amount in ranked because you can do these solo plays. But the problem where the weakness in these type of setups is that if the defense counters by pushing something. In this example, the most common way to fight is probably the A main push. So we can switch over to defense real fast. If they want to contest A main because they know that the attackers are so spread out, then they'll, Omen blind main with, people running down main and fighting that. And then now you can kind of like 3v2 or 4v2 these guys because you know that they're so spread out. So you have to be careful with defaults with doing too much because defenders can now aggress and just pick them off. And it's too hard to trade out.
And the fundamental advantage on attack is that you have agency, like you have more decision points on where to go. You generally have a man advantage. And so when you default too much, or you're talking about getting spread too thin, you're losing that man advantage.
Right. You don't have that death ball anymore. And with the benefit of the 4-1, you typically can trade out. And any aggressive play that they do, you can counter it because you have the bodies and the util already there. That's where I would be careful. It's okay if you do want to do defaults like this, but it's less, like you have less agency in what happens in the round.
Okay. So that's the 4-1 default, and that would probably be the easiest default to call.
Right.
Are there any other ones that come to mind for you?
Yeah, so you could just start mid straight up like a 4-1, but if you are going to go mid, you typically need a 1-3-1. This is probably the only other one I would recommend. Let me switch back. So the start is similar, right? You have your Killjoy here, except this time you have your Omen watching the A push. Sometimes the Omen will do it TPing on the little hut here. I forget where it is actually, but let's just for the
it's
sake,
like right over there. Yeah.
For the sake of simplicity, let's just put the Omen here, and then Omen will smoke cat or bot mid. But for the sake of this, we'll just do cat because it's the most normal one. And
what would be the decision point between smoking cat or bot mid? So if you smoke cat, you're going to be working up mid, and if you smoke bot mid, you're working up cat.
Yep. Basically, the bot mid smoke is normally to walk up cat like you said, and that kind of implies an A split. Because you can obviously go up to entry points
like that.
So with that said, you can 1-3-1 with either. It's not bad, but I think it's a little bit simpler to talk about it like this. So we have the Sova, the Jet, and the KO going 1-3-1. They use all their mid util to work up into market ideally. So maybe you dart here, maybe you KO knife market, something like this. And that's kind of your mid default, right? After the Sova darts or drones, he can hold cat push, or the Killjoy can come over and hold the cat push while these 3 work into mid. And then essentially the Omen's job and the Killjoy's job is just to hold space. And then if they get aggressed on, then these 3 players can now, I guess, react, right? So for this example, let's say they just pushed A main. There's 2 spotted A main. These guys can now speed up into cat because they know cat is kind of free, because the defenders are pushing. And that's the benefit of this 1-3-1. You have like 2 sources of info on the extremities, kind of just holding and spotting. And then these 3 are like the core of the team, and they just pivot based on what happens on the extremities. And if they do get lucky and get a kill, let's say like they kill the Raze here, then we can start working into a B split, which is where this Killjoy can come back and start working into B main, and then now you can do like a 1-3 split while this Omen is the lurker. Right, so this setup, this 1-3-1 setup is very flexible because you can work into a split or you can go into a lurking position if you're on the extremities. So let's say
Okay.
like they don't kill this guy mid, right? But the killjoy actually punishes a guy pushing cat like this. And then we can actually just pivot back to A, and then Omen works up A main. So it's the same example, but opposite, right? And this is very regular to happen on defaults when you do a 1-3-1. You're just looking for mistakes, and you're just looking to slowly take map control. And then hopefully work into an A or a B split.
And I think it's that concept of the chain, right? There's like a chain of defenders like this. And if you kill a guy, that chain is broken somewhere. And there's a momentary time, a lapse, or there's a period in time when if you kill that guy a cat, as an example, like this Phoenix, then there's a gap in that chain right there.
Right. Very easy to abuse. Like you want to kind of break it before they, I guess, combine again. So yeah, I would say that's defense or like defaults for attack. You will typically do something like a 1-3-1 or a 1-4. You can get into like more specific examples like 2-1-2s and stuff, but those are harder to pull off. So
maybe walk me through A side and B side. Maybe we'll start A. In the 1-3-1 or even the 4-1, like how do you think through hitting A? Like do you always like is it bad? I don't know the answer to this at all. Like, is it bad to hit A all 4 from A main? Like, if all 4 of you are right here and you're just going in, is that bad? Like, do you need to be ideally always splitting through tree, or is it okay to just force A main and take side?
yeah,
Like, how do you make that decision?
so this is a very, very good question. This is probably where most of the mistakes come out from Ascent is, okay, so let's start with the actual A rush. Can you rush A with 4? Majority of the time, it's like 50-50. It depends on their setup, right? So if I'm playing attack and I want to rush A, the times I would call to rush A is if the enemy team has a weak A setup. And the way I like to identify that is if their Omen isn't playing A or if their Omen just sucks, like he doesn't actually know how to stop an A rush, A is possible, right? Because the Omen blind is so strong. So if their Omen is actually good, he can actually rush. And then on top of that, if they do have a KO on the side, the suppress is too good, right? So if you all group A main and then get suppressed, the entire execute is dead, right? So
Because they all know you're here, you have no util, and they're gonna fully stack the site.
right. You get suppressed, which means they can smoke, and then they just all rotate. So very hard to very hard to rush against a KO. And on top of the suppress, he also has a molly, right? So you're fighting a suppress, an Omen blind, and a KO molly, which means you can't really rush. But if they don't have that, or if like they just don't play the KO, because that happens a lot in rank to play like a secondary duelist, you can get away with rushing A. And in that case, you don't really need a guide tree. Your jet can dash out.
Why is that?
So you don't need the guide tree because you can kind of just
You can smoke tree.
you can smoke tree, and then you can just have your jet go out, and then your second or third guy will kind of close door for the jet. And if you're playing against a KO, then they can kind of flash through or molly through, or sorry, like molly main. But because the Omen doesn't have that support, here, let's make it a little bit better. We'll put the enemy Omen in red. So this red Omen doesn't get support if they don't really have a KO. Because like let's say like it was a Reyna. Like the Reyna can't really flash through. It's just very easy to punish that. But the KO has like an actual pop flash. So you can very well 4-man rush A against this comp. But if their comp's a little bit better, let's say they're playing KO, you're going to have a hard time. So in this example here, if you did want to hit A, you're better off doing that bot mid smoke, maybe doing like a 3-1 up cat with the Sova, the Omen, the Sova, the KO, and the Jet. And then you just have your Omen late main. And then you might have your Killjoy towards top mid with the turret like this.
So what's your decision process behind putting 3 cat and just Omen main?
So you typically want to have more numbers towards the center of the map because this is where they're going to fight the bulk. Like they're going to be fighting the defenders rotators, right? So in this example, it'll probably be like a Sova or a Jet here. And you need more numbers to trade out here. Whereas like the guy main can kind of slowly walk up and be a little bit safer. And I guess the reasoning on splitting in the first place is because now we need to split the util. So let me get rid of these agents real fast. So before we said we couldn't go out A main because they have the KO knife, the suppress, the flash, right? Well, now if it's split, they're probably using Omen blind maybe for main, and then the KO is just using the util for cat, and they're split. So that means that you can kind of just trade util with each other and hit the site. You have another entry point. This is probably the mistake that most people make in Ascent is they don't recognize.
In my games, everyone just is an A main.
Yeah,
and it's like so uncommon for people to go mid because mid just requires even a semblance of coordination, right? Because we need to call for a bot mid smoke.
Mm-hmm.
You need to walk up cat. You need to call for util into tree. Whereas I feel like the most common one is just like 5 people A main and you're just running it down.
Yeah. And it feels very exposed to kind of go up mid. Even if you do have the smoke,
Yes.
this guy can kind of like late PQ cat, and this guy can
Yes.
kind of run through the smoke. So people are just scared to do it in the lower ranks.
Yes.
But, you have to work the map and actually get good
Yeah.
splits off. So,
Yeah.
yep.
The other interesting thing I saw was, I was watching a Psalm Fade VOD, and he would actually like instantly, like off rip, he would, let me grab Fade. He would like haunt here
Mm-hmm.
immediately and then seize here when they were rushing A.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that seems like kind of a waste. But now I realize that part of it is just being able to basically, once you smoke this and you seize it, you can actually run out and no one will be running out of that smoke.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of his goal with when they were actually just hitting A hard.
Right. That's an adaptation that you'll see out of the higher ranks because the flood is so common. So you know how we were talking about the Omen Blind earlier for the A rush? Instead of doing the Omen Blind here, as you get, like, if they aren't contesting A main, it's actually better to save your blind, so you can do it like this to get dice and the tree
Oh,
smoke,
okay.
because it, effectively it would hit the full setup here because most
Yeah.
anchors play dice and most flash agents play tree smoke. So this
Yeah.
will allow you to kind of close the door. You could also just angle it more towards Gen to hit more towards
Yeah.
the smoke, but then you won't get dice. But it's probably a better line if you do it like this. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the idea.
Interesting.
Cool.
Okay. So that's kind of how you would play A.
Right.
And what I'm actually noticing as you're talking about this is it's really trying to think about which site is the weaker site. Because I think if Cypher were here and let's say another initiator, you're not as comfortable. Like you would prefer to hit the site, one, with less people, and two, with less effective util, preventing you from getting on site.
Right. And that plays a huge part. Like when you have KO, you just pop the KO ult and you can just rush because like the trips are no longer there. So when you play KO, you can kind of just play fast, and that's why he's so good on this map. But yeah, that's a very good point. And I guess on that note, like it's very hard to deal with ops on this map too, because typically like the enemy operator can kind of just avoid a lot of util on these executes. So a very common spot to play up here is Coffin or the top right heaven box. And if you play up here, you can effectively dodge every piece of util aside from maybe a Sova Dart, right?
Okay.
And because of that, even if you did a slow split or like let's say you did a cat split or you did an A rush, this jet is invincible. So kind of figuring out where he is with your Sova drone and getting that tag is crucial, or just spotting the jet early in the round and then going to the other side, because like you just can't effectively deal with the op that well. It's so hard to do on this map, I think.
Well, that's maybe my question for the end on attack is how you play around ops, because like it'd be very common that an op is posted middle or mid.
Yeah, it's very hard to play against an op. That's honestly where most people die. But if you do play against the mid op, you ideally just util him out. So you could dart, you could drone. That's like the most common way to deal with him. Let me get rid of this.
Okay. So like I think the way to think about it is smoke him off, get close, and basically use all of your util to make his life difficult, and then basically nullify his ability to use this $4,700 gun.
Yep. The more you can kind of make his life miserable, the better off you are. That's one option. I guess the other option is actually to pull out an attack op if you are playing Jet, and you can just hold for his peak. So let's say like the Jet likes to peek cat a lot, you can buy an attack op and then just try to go for that duel.
Okay.
But obviously that requires your Jet to op.
The other option is to run away from the op.
Yep.
But that often is also just kind of playing into the defense's hands, because they would generally be having the op hold space and then have more players on the other areas of the map.
Yep. So just to kind of illustrate this, because you are completely right. Let's say with their enemy Jet is kind of posted A main and he gets set up with like a KO knife, then they could have the Omen kind of spot their cat, or in this setup, it might be better for the Omen to be here, the Killjoy could be here, and the Sova could be here. So it's actually better for defenders if the attackers went towards B because the op is posted A, like you were saying. So you can't always avoid the op, because then you're running into a stack, which is why the op is so strong in defense. You're either avoiding, or you're either running into the Sentinel util, or you're either running into the op, which is so difficult. But you have to pick your poison.
So maybe let's shift over to B then. What does it look like, after the default, or even if you're rushing, what does it look like? What is the thought process or framework that you're hitting B? Is it, B main pushes versus working up mid and trying to pinch through mid? What's the thought process there?
Yep, good question. So for the sake of this example, we're just going to assume that they're playing 3 towards A, or something like 2 towards A and then the Jets floating, right, as a defense setup. And this is probably the number one common mistake that defense does. I know we're talking about attack, but this is important to decide to go B, is that actually one of the B players is playing market, right? So for the sake of this example, I'll just put Killjoy market and I'll put Sova here, because Sovas like to do the Odin spam and the shock dart stuff.
Yeah.
So if we have this read where like the 2 B players aren't actually on site together, you can just bum rush B. If you can get your KO knife somewhere on site to kind of get that info as well, it's good. The most common one is the KO will stand here and throw the knife to land here. So it scans stairs and where the Sova is, the lane angle.
Okay.
And then you just bum rush, right? And it's actually easier to rush B than it is to rush A if this guy is playing in market, because he's just smoked off. And typically the market player doesn't have a flash, right? Because you can see it's the Killjoy. So if it's smoked off, he's just like, he can't do anything to help. He can maybe run through and get one and then die and get traded, or he just has to wait it out, and that's not very good.
So that's actually an important pattern. I feel like that comes pretty naturally to you. It doesn't come naturally to me. Is when you smoke off a player, it's a huge disadvantage when they're a non-flash player, like a non-flash character, and it's a bit of an advantage when they're a flash player.
Yep.
Right. Like when you smoke off a Sky or a KO, like that isn't great for you, because he's gonna pop flash you and swing, kill one, and then duck back in.
Correct. The way I like to think about it is like it's rock, paper, scissors. Smokes counter normal players, and then flash counters the smoke, but then flashes might not counter open space because you don't really have cover to use, right? So, but yeah, that's typically what I'm thinking about on a B rush. If they're playing split like this, then you can just rush B. But in higher ranks, they'll play double B, right?
Yep.
In which means that you can't actually rush B. So this is where you're looking for mid splits. And the reason on this should make sense. You don't mid split against 2 mid players, but you will mid split against 1 mid player, right? So it's really important to where this player is if you decide to work mid or to work B. And in this example, if they are double B like that, you can send like some players to take B main and try to break the Killjoy turret, the aggressive one or the passive one, depending on where they're putting it. And then you just send everyone else mid. And hopefully you don't die to like a Jet running through the smoke, because that's honestly what happens a lot of the time, is a Jet will just pop dash, run through the smoke, kill one, and dash out, and then the whole hit is dead, which is the hard part. So in these examples, you might actually send the Killjoy to put aggressive turret here to spot the cat smoke. And, I guess while we're talking about it, we might as well talk about a proper B rush or a B split. So, yeah, we'll just pretend this is a setup. We'll smoke cat. We'll put the turret here. Sometimes your Killjoy will molly as well, but then we dart bot mid. Your Jet and your Jet will scale with that. Typically, your KO will also scale with that. And then maybe your Sova if he wants to drone. For the sake of this example, we will say that the Sova won't scale, but the Killjoy will. The Killjoy will kind of.
So maybe just so I can totally understand why KJ's not going with them.
Yep.
Because KJ needs to hold the space and stay near the turret. But how are you choosing where the main duelist goes?
The main duelist almost always goes in mid, just because they have to be the one to follow the initiator util. Because someone has to take advantage of it, right?
Got it. Okay. So that's really the initiator duelist buddy system.
Yes.
Okay.
So for the sake of this example, actually, we will have the Killjoy go with them just because the turret is here and it makes sense. And then the Solo after the dart would come back to B main and then either drone B main with the Omen or they'll just walk it together. And now you're doing a 3-2 split. And then as we kind of go through the exec, so the cat smoke is there and then the Omen will either smoke spawn like this. I'm going to get rid of this dart. He will either smoke spawn for the mid cross so they can get into market pretty safely, or he will smoke this and then the Jet will do the mid smoke to cross. Both are good because you need to cross both, and then you just have to sight like this. And the benefit of going into market is now the microwave setup doesn't affect the market players, right?
Yeah. The difference with smoking mid with the Jet smoke and smoking mid with the Omen smoke is if you're smoking this with the Jet smoke, everyone's got to move. Like Jet smoking, and then we're all kind of execing like right onto site. There's no, like, you don't really want to be sitting here in market. I guess maybe that's true like, either way. Either way, you probably don't want to be sitting here in market.
Yeah, you don't want to sit in market, but you can leave a player sitting here, like bot mid like this, or a player sitting pizza. Especially if they
Hmm.
do the killjoy turret like this, it'll keep active and you can kind of know where to put your crosshair. So if the turret
Okay.
shoots, you can look bot mid. If it doesn't
Okay.
shoot, you can look up here. So in that note, like typically the jet and the KO will make it past with the jet smoke, but your killjoy will kind of hold back and hold their back. And yeah, this is just a pretty standard B split. After this, these guys kind of scale out like this. The Omen might blind stairs or sight, and then they kind of just go out together and hopefully
Hmm.
pinch.
Hmm. Hmm.
And one thing to note
Okay.
is either the enemy jet will push through the smoke to fight, which is why this turret is here,
Yeah.
or they all rotate together as three and then go like this. And there's a rare example of where the jet was actually getting aggressive main and he'd go top mid. But either way, the turret blocks it.
Got it.
Cool.
So the KJ is here to make sure you don't get punished on like a defensive aggressive flank,
Right, right. Having that turret
which
is
would
huge.
absolutely blow you up if they get the timing right.
Yes, yes. I mean, like that jet can solo win the round by just like running through the smoke and no one's watching it, and then he like flanks three as they're coming up mid like this.
Yeah.
If the turret's not there, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty tough because most killjoys in ranked actually don't put this turret here on the B split. They'll just go B main, and then like the Omen is the guy holding this, and then he has a hard time dealing with everything. But
Okay.
there is value with the Omen going here because you could Omen blind market for your jet if you don't have the KO.
Okay.
But you know it is still very hard to pull off because no turret.
And what about, we didn't talk about this for A, but for B, let's say you're hitting B main. You're already pretty spread out if you're hitting it split. But if you're hitting B main from, or say hitting B only from B main,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say the one guy's in market,
Right.
let's say KJ's in market, because you've identified that and this is a good decision, right? What's the routing look like?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I think most people, like I think in my rank, generally route. The only person who's routing to switch is the jet because they're dashing in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone else is just running down lane because it's like the safest. Like you want to get away from market as quickly as possible. Like what is the thought process around routing?
Yeah, so I like to cut up the B site into spots. So let me draw a cleaner line to that. Let me draw front sight.
Yeah.
This as this red box, and then everything else with this yellow box. Okay. So typically when you execute, you need your jet to either dash. What do you call? Under market or switch. Most people
Yep.
do the switch dash to close the door.
Yep.
And then that secures the red box. So most of the time you're okay with just sending the jet to solo go out here and then everyone else would go and start working on the yellow box, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the most common approach. But as you kind of climb the ranks, the red box is a lot harder to get because maybe the Silva's playing stairs and this guy's running market, and then the KO's flashing through the spawn smoke, right? So the red box is actually very hard sometimes, and in which case it's actually better for everyone to kind of contain the red box and then secure the space first and then work into the yellow space, right?
Yeah.
But I guess to answer the question as simply as possible, jet goes out, closes door, routes stairs, and then everyone else goes lane to pinch site, right? That's the most common. But as you get better, you do want to throw in some nuances where maybe the KO follows the jet, and then the Sova and the Omen slow work lane while they hold the market smoke for a second. And then as they're coming upstairs, you can do like a 2-2 pinch.
So I think what's really important here is you're adjusting how you're hitting the site. Like I think most attacking strategy is just about like, where do we go?
Right.
But I think what I'm hearing from you is, after the first round, if you see them playing it in a certain way, then you should be adjusting how you're hitting site to correspond or kind of combat that, right? Like,
Yep.
so if they're pushing out hard and they're really contesting that red box, then you need to change your play accordingly. And like, if you're going to hit B, it means your call is slightly different to everyone.
And sometimes I'll consciously ask my killjoy, because mollies deal with the smoke so well, to like, hey, they have double flash characters, can you actually molly the market smoke or molly the spawn smoke or molly both? That would be great, because like then you don't have to worry about the red box as much, and then you can do that normal routing. So maybe the
Okay.
adaptation isn't to have more bodies, you just throw more util in the smoke.
Add more util.
Yep.
Yeah. Or like a seize or something.
Yep.
Or something to hold the space, a molly.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool.
That makes a lot of sense. When you're hitting site, is there an ideal way, like maybe just quickly, how do you think about post plants on B? Because I feel like there's a big difference between sitting back site and having someone be main. Like ideally, it feels at least intuitive to me that you wouldn't really want to be all stuck on site.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Like because then you're kind of trapped in a fishbowl. Like I feel like ideally you have at least one person be main, or like be main, like maybe wrapping back to mid.
Right. Yeah, the more space you have, the better you're off. That's just a good general rule of thumb. So if your killjoy holds back main, it's a good thing. Or if like you do have that mid lurk, it is a good thing because you have more options, right? That's just typically how it is. But if you're forced to kind of send all 5 people just to take site in the first place, and then you have to turtle here because you are having a hard time taking site and like without it, then your post plant is going to be pretty turtled, and you're just hoping for the trades. But if the execute was somewhat relatively easy, right? Like let's say like the Sova was just a solo B player in the Killjoy's market, then you can pretty much just stay pretty aggressive space. The Killjoy sits back here, the Sova dies hopefully, and then you just have one guy on site planning, and the other guy's just like, you can kind of prep more for an aggressive post plant. And I guess this relates back to those boxes, right? So I'll draw them again. If you have like, if your jet is pushed up, then you can kind of play more in the red box to kind of contain the choke points, right? Don't let them out of the smokes to even start the retake in the first place. And once the smokes fade, you can still kind of contest it because your jet has contact. And ideally, one of your omen smokes come back up. But if you don't have your jet here, let's say your jet's playing back here, then yeah, you are going to be more relegated to the yellow box. And the way you can think about it too is you can play both, right? So if you play the red box first, you're fighting off of your jet. Boom, jet dies. You get the trade. Like let's say you're the Sova, you get the trade on the Killjoy. Then you can just fall back into the yellow box and then let your Killjoy play late B main. So I guess the TLDR post plants, you kind of want to contest the space. Sorry. Because you don't want them to run out of the smokes, and you don't want them to kind of get free space. And then once you kind of lose that space, you can just fall back.
Yeah, take one fight, fall back.
Yep.
Okay, let's maybe, now that we've run through attacking, maybe let's jump over to the defense side. We'll start off with what do you think like is a basic setup to defend on Ascent?
Yeah, so the best setup most of the time is you're going to have a 2-1-2. So your jet will be whatever. And the most important thing here is that you actually have 2 on both sides. Because as we've established before, if you have one player on the site and one kind of weaker on the other, like in the rotator position, your site anchor is just going to get run over. And that's probably why you see so many successful rushes in the first place. So number one, establishing a strong site means that you need at least 2 players there. And
so let's say we're looking at A right now with Omen and KO. So this is kind of like, usually, I mean, it's so common. I think you would have one guy Dice or Jen, maybe, or even Heaven, and one guy Tree.
Yep.
And so what I'm hearing from you is like, that's kind of suboptimal.
Yeah. If your KO is a Tree player, it's fine because he has the flashes, he has the molly, he has the suppress.
Okay.
But if your secondary,
if that's your Reyna, it's bad.
Yeah. If your Reyna is playing here, you're going to lose probably. He has to like get a good timing, and your Omen blind has to be pretty good. So a better way to hold that's a good point. Maybe we'll do the example with Reyna instead.
Okay.
So if you have a 2-man A setup, you kind of want to just contest a main with a one-way smoke, right? So you're one-way for the Reyna. Reyna gets contact, and then the Omen will either blind to help the Reyna continue fighting, or the Omen can play a little bit more aggressively and blind here.
Yeah.
And their goal isn't to hold A site, it's to contest A main for a few reasons. One, it kind of stops at default, letting them get free A main control, and you get info. And then 2, it's probably just easier to hold A main than it is to hold the entirety of A site.
Okay.
So that's A.
Because I think the kind of mentality of most players, like I'm speaking for myself maybe, is like you just kind of want to like plug all the holes in the ship, right?
Yep.
So I'm hearing here is like you'd rather actually fight for A main, and then let's say they all run up cat, then you would actually just like push out A main and hold that space. Yeah, so if they run up cat, then you would just kind of go over here and hold this space.
100%.
And then retake site from A main and from Heaven, and then you kind of have them pinched.
Yep, you have them boxed in, And if they do try to split A, then you can just fight those 2 or 3 players, and then it's not bad either. Okay, so that's A, right? Establishing a strong A setup, either to play for site if you have the KO, or to play more for main if you have the Reyna. And to clarify, you can still play for A main if you have the KO, because the one-way plus suppress is good.
Yeah. What about, maybe can you talk about cat? Like, where does cat come into this? Like, I often see players like maybe just peek tiles like right off the bat.
Right.
Or sometimes when they get smoked off here, they'll like creep into this smoke.
So cat is probably the hardest spot. That's like, it's like the most, I guess, nuanced because like really good players control cat well and really bad players don't even play cat. So in this example, if we are playing more towards cat, then that means we're kind of like okay with them just rushing A and we're just playing retake. And in those instances, you probably have like a killjoy ult to play retake. So yeah, in this example, if we are doing that, then you might, the best way to play it is like crossfire. You play one guy tucked and then the other guy has util to fight off of. So this is one way to play it. And if you do play it like this, then ideally your mid player delays so that the cat smoke fades. And then when the cat smokes, because like what can happen is if you're just smoked off and then your mid player gets rushed, then you can't do anything aside from wait the smoke out or try to rush them.
I see.
Right.
Okay. But if the smoke is faded, then you have more ability to push out mid.
Right. And that's what we were talking about on attack, where like on attack, it kind of feels awkward to actually take mid because you're open, right? Without the smoke, right? So like if...
But what I'm noticing is you're really, the kind of heuristic here is you're really playing these two guys together.
Oh yeah, yeah. You have to play your two site players together most of the time. Ideally. If this guy's like fighting solo cat and this guy's fighting solo A main, this guy's dies cat, this guy's solo, he's going to get split on.
Every single one of my games. I'm not talking about my teammates. I'm like talking about myself. Right. I feel like this is me.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
So mid.
Yeah, so mid, you don't really contest mid too much on defense unless you have the jet op or unless you have like a recon that comes in to scan. But yeah, mid kind of belongs to attackers unless you have that jet op, like I said. So if you do have the op, you just hope that your jet gets a kill, honestly.
Yeah.
You don't really do too much as the other players, aside from like maybe contesting cat once the smoke fades. Like you can do a little bit of a ping pong. Like the jet gets the first kill on this guy, he falls back, smoke fades, and then you can kind of like walk off cat like for the second kill, like here. But it's like less organized, kind of just free flowing. So yeah, mid's just you just more so play it for
it's
info.
more reacting, and he's just more in that spot because he can get to both sides quickly too, right?
Yep, and he can go for flanks too if he has a rifle.
Well, and I guess the other part of it is that he has the get out of jail free card, which is like he can try to take a fight and get out.
He's allowed to go for this stuff. And maybe the most important part about Ascent is actually the B hold, because retaking B compared to A is so hard. So ideally your two B players are on the same page.
Unless you're Trent, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the most common way that you'll see in the higher rated lobbies is the aggro turret, because the aggro turret lets your Sova spam when the enemy player walks into B main. So that's one.
Okay.
The Sova could also shock dart off of the turret or recon, right? So the turret does a lot for B main because those walls are paper. And that means that your killjoy kind of just does whatever, honestly. He just floats, but he has to be ready for the actual rush. So most of the time the killjoy is just looking for the Sova dart for the rush that lands on the tree here or that lands on the tree back here.
Oh, so he's specifically recognizing that if his Sova wants to play lane aggressively or spam aggressively, his responsibility is breaking the turret.
Yes, 100%. If the killjoy isn't, actually contesting B main with the turret here, then he needs to be the player back here to break the util for the Sova.
But I'm seeing something different here, which is you're not, because maybe of the util at hand, but also because it maybe of just the site geometry. Like you're not, the goal here isn't to actually push into B main.
Yeah, holding B main in itself is harder because you don't have like a spot to play. Like A main, you have the spot to play wine once you actually take it, and you can play off of the wine guy. But it's a little bit harder for us to do that in B main.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do it though. Full taking B main is not bad. If you wanted to do that, you have the Sova dart outside of B main like this, and then you actually have your jet walk up with the op and post and kill the guy back here. It's actually not bad to do, but it's a little bit harder to do, and you need the jet. You can't really do that with the killjoy unless you're throwing. So yeah.
And maybe the biggest question I have is for both sites, what do you do when they just 5-man rush?
So this is where your strong A hold comes in, right? So let's go back to A. The A hold, ideally your player plays dice and he flashes as they're coming out, and then you want to isolate the jet dash. So when the jet dashes out, the flash delays the rest of the team. They're stuck behind the smoke. I'll just put Omen here. And then these two players need to pair up to kill the jet. Okay. And once that jet is dead, everyone else is behind the smoke, and you kind of just win from there. If you don't successfully kill this jet and this jet actually kills the Omen, the round's lost most of the time. So this is like the biggest battle that you need to be thinking about.
So really, this is thinking one or two steps ahead and thinking they're going to do this. This is the most important thing, and this is how we're going to try to fight it.
Yeah, it's one thing I learned playing controller is that it's as soon as I kill their duelist, because like I was the duelist for so many games, and now that I'm controller, I kind of can predict what he's going to do. And because I can predict what he does, like they rush A, like I already in my head know I won the round most of the time. It's like a It's a pretty high chance just because it's so textbook in ranked. Like people don't really play around the Omen blind. Like they don't know. Yeah. I guess that's
Mm.
what I mean. It's so readable. Everything is so predictable once you play enough because people learn from videos like this how to hit sites. It's just so cookie cutter. Like there's not really a
Well,
lot of
I
adaptation.
think you're also noticing, like you're naturally. I think this is why you're hiring like a Radiant player, but you naturally have keyed in on the fact that the entry duelist fight is the most important fight.
Right.
And therefore, if that's the most important fight, like all not all the fights are created equal, that's the most important thing. Then on the defense, we should really be game planning like how to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So your game plan is he's going to dash out. He's probably going to smoke dash top of gen. You're going to smoke off a main. You're going to blind. They're not going to be able to run out. And you and Reina are going to just swing.
Yep.
Because like you're not going to win it 90% of the time, but you've taken that maybe like 50-50 to like a 75-25.
Yeah, and the beauty actually is a lot of jets don't go top gen. The top gen one is the most annoying one because it dodges the
Okay.
Omen blind. If the jet does like a normal dash entry like on the floor, like here or
Okay.
here, he actually gets
He's
hit.
just he's a goner.
He's just dead because he gets hit by the Omen blind and now he has to refresh his second smoke. And you can kind of like angle out if you're playing dice. You can angle out left side and just spray the smoke or wait for the smoke to fade and kill him before their teammates get unblind and come out. So yeah,
Okay.
most jets actually suck from this, and you just get so many free kills.
Okay.
Okay, so now for B. The most important thing about B is that your B players actually need to stay alive long enough for the rotator to come in and for hopefully a supporting smoke. But for the sake of this conversation, we won't actually include the smoke because it's a little high level. But these guys just need to stay alive. So as soon as the B execute happens, the difference here is that we actually aren't looking to kill the jet dash, right? This one's
Yeah.
actually too hard to
Yeah,
do.
you're not trying to swing switch.
Yeah, this one's just too hard, right? Because like
Yeah.
when they push out the B main smoke, they can scale left, and it's just too hard. So it's better for these two guys to kind of turtle up towards the site. One guy goes back site, one guy plays double stack here, or what do you call triple? And like they're kind of just playing off of each other's contact, and hopefully util as well, right? So if you have the microwave set up lane, then you can just double focus stairs, and that's super free. And if someone does come lane, they're just going to get toast. So yeah, it's more of like a hunker down site on B here. And these guys need to be on the same page because,
So I mean,
go ahead.
this is fairly simple. I feel like what I'm seeing is that pre-round, if you're playing with a buddy, you've got what are we doing off rip? And then what are we doing when they hit site?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can just figure that out, then you've got like a way better chance to win the round.
I promise you, if you get a team that does this most basic stuff, you get like a 9-3 or a 10-2 defense half in Radiant. It's just the problem is people don't do that, and like you have like fill players play the Killjoy or the Sova, and like they won't play a
Sure.
double B. So
Sure.
yeah,
But here's the thing is we can't control other players. All we can control is like how we're asking the team to play. And if they ignore us, like there's nothing you can do. You're just going to have to try to figure out what's the best way you can adopt to how your teammates are playing. But if you can just communicate this on a regular basis, your win rate's going to go up.
yeah, so free. It's like so simple too. And
Mm.
this is why Ascent is like, I feel like the meta is solved, but people don't do it right because either they're fail or they're just not actually thinking about playing these type of setups. Like Ascent is, I don't know, it's one of the most annoying maps because I think once you actually play against people that have it solved, there's not much counterplay. Like you just have to win the duel or like throw a billion fakes or, you know, whatever, like just have a better opper. It's just like, yeah, there's not much outplaying macro wise. But of course, for the majority of players, that's probably not the case.
Okay. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you felt like you needed to say about Ascent?
Maybe just the importance of switching things up. Like at
Yeah.
some point, this setup will become readable. It's going to be very strong for the first 5 rounds, maybe longer. But once they kind of get a read on it, you do want your jet to float around with the op. Or if you have Killjoy ult retake, you could play the Killjoy A, and then you can play like a different type of setup because then you can just stack somewhere else. And I guess if you do play the Killjoy ult A, it would be a good round to do the Sova Dart B main to get the jet posted with the op, like deep. And then your Killjoy is just vibing here. So
Yeah.
switching things up is
But
a
I think
very
an
big
important
thing.
point around that is you want them to punish you before you switch.
Yep. You could be a little bit proactive about it as well. You definitely can be. But for the majority of players, and you probably don't have to do that. That's like something if you're playing against, I don't know, Daznarth or Som
Okay.
or something. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's been our deep dive into Ascent. Thank you for walking us through that, Adam. And thanks for taking all my questions. I hope that was helpful to everyone. If this is interesting or helpful to you, like, please let us know in the comments or on Discord or wherever you consume this. And until next week, be well.
Be well. Peace out.